Hi, welcome my new podcast. I'm Kathy McKee, and this is about Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby. Well, everybody certainly knows who he is. An icon in show business. Everybody's dad. One of the most famous men, black men certainly, ever in show business, and probably one of the wealthiest. So, what's the deal with Bill Cosby? I've done an awful lot of interviews, and the question has been asked to me many, many, many times. And it's really a complicated story. It's not easy to really pin it on one specific thing. I'm not a psychologist, and most people aren't, and most of the people that worked with him in show business aren't. And show business is a funny, funny business. People that are fortunate enough to work in the industry, they cherish their work and the gift of being able to get that part, win that audition, be in those places with those celebrities like Bill Cosby. And it's very difficult to let that go, to turn your back on that, to walk away from it, especially if something horrible has happened to you, put on you by a very wealthy, very, very famous movie star like Bill Cosby. So how do these things happen? I know you want to know. I know you'd like to imagine, if you can, be a fly on the wall and really understand what exactly happened to Bill Cosby. What caused this behavior, character, disturbance? Well, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm Kathy McKee. I've had a 50-year show business industry career. I've worn many different hats throughout that career. In the late 60s, I was lucky enough to be a lead showgirl in Las Vegas. I was 15 years old, and in order to work there in 1965, you had to be white. So I was passing for white. I'm mixed, multicultural, black father and a white mother. I'm the sister of actress Lynette McKee. Many of you will know and recognize that name. In the 70s, I worked in sitcoms, Sanford and Son, Good Times, The Bill Cosby Show, Saturday Night Live. I went on to host a morning talk show in Los Angeles with Sandy Barron for a little over a year and a half. Sandy and I were on KHJ, Channel 9 in Los Angeles. We were the morning couple. We were before Regis and Kathy. We started the comedy team bit in the talk show industry. Of course, Sandy Barron was not credited with it the way he should have been. So many people disliked him, but that was the story. Then I went on to travel and work with Sandy Frank, also live with him. I was his girlfriend, his on and off bi-coastal girlfriend for many years. I gave up my career to be with him. He was a very famous television syndicator and an entertainment producer. And this is how I came to know Bill Cosby. Oh, and I didn't mention that very early in my career, I began working. Sammy Davis gave me really my first important job, which was the mistress of ceremonies of his nightclub act. or as Billy Crystal would say, I was the drink girl. Well, it actually started out as a title with Sammy before I joined the group as the drink girl, the girl who came out on stage like a vaudeville act and brought him a drink, and he'd make a few cracks and a few jokes, and I'm 5'10" and a half, so he came just up to my breast, and we did funny bits, and he would then introduce me and I would leave the stage. Well, that developed when my relationship with Sammy developed into a serious, ongoing love relationship, which I must tell you I deeply, deeply did love him. He was a wonderful, kind man to me. He was a mentor to me. I learned an awful lot in the wings of that nightclub act, traveling around the world with Sammy for a period of 4.5 or 5 years on the road, also as his live-in lover girlfriend, and working in the show and watching him and studying him. I learned about show business. And that's actually how I met Bill Cosby. And many, many, many of the other men in my life. I traveled to, I was engaged to Richard Pryor briefly in the 70s. He did several films with my sister Lynette, and I traveled to New York and worked on Saturday Night Live when Richard was the guest host in 1975. So what I'm saying here to you and trying to help you imagine what it was like, my position in show business, and I'd like to be able to share in great depth some of the stories and some of the things that I witnessed and that happened to me during the years that I was working directly in show business. I still am. I'm a casting director today, but I'm not as attached, obviously, to people because of my past and because of the things that have happened to me. I'm rather fearful of people, and I'm a loner, and I'm very happy just being able to find talent for producers and directors today that they're looking for, and being able to help young people starting out their career in show business to get them on the right track and to give them information that they need in order to work in this business. So what I'm going to talk about on my podcast, and I'm also going to bring on and interview people, I'm going to expose and tell you stories, intimate, deep stories, kind of like a fly on the wall of my relationships with many, many famous men in show business. Starting since Bill Cosby seems to be of so much interest to so many people. And in the beginning, when I first came out and talked to the New York Daily News to tell my story, I came out to support a few women that had come out before me in 2014. And one of the things that happened immediately, which is what had happened over the years with Cosby, whenever a woman made any suggestion that anything funny or strange or weird was happening with Bill Cosby, they were cut down. You know, they were shut up very quickly. And I knew that. Since I was in the business when this incident happened to me, I was actually traveling with Sammy Davis on the road, and he was my boyfriend and my lover, and I was working in his nightclub act. I had been an actress in LA on and off of different shows. I had dated many very important, well-known, famous men, stars of sitcoms. Damon Wilson, who was the star of Sanford and Son. He and I had quite a torrid relationship, kind of sneaky because he was married. He was separated. It was on and off, you know. And of course, I was young and naive, and I fell hook, line, and sinker for, well, I'm going to leave my wife, you know, on and off, on and off. Now that I really look back at it, it's difficult to say this. It's heart-wrenching because I fell madly, deeply, deeply in love with Demond Wilson. But that was just a booty call for him. Nothing more. I don't think he's very capable of much more of a relationship. I have to give his wife a great deal of credit. She has put up with, I can't even begin to imagine the stories of what she's probably been through in her, 40-something years of marriage now? And baby after baby. It's probably been very hard for her. I hope she's reaped the rewards, the benefits of beautiful clothes, and financially, I hope it's balanced out for her to find happiness and peace. And I'm very sorry today when I look back at it, what happened. But I believed him in his story that he had left his wife, and they were breaking up, and they were going to get a divorce, and, you know, on and on and on and on, yada, yada. And every time he'd show up at my door, you know, months would go by, he'd go back home, then he'd leave again. And it was always the same thing. And quite frankly, I was young and naive, and I didn't really care what the deal was. I was hot for him, and we had a very hot sexual romance. So I did it. I did what I wanted to do very freely and very openly. And of course, I probably hurt her, and I'm sorry about it now. But I blame him because he made the call. So back to Bill Cosby. So that's how I met Bill Cosby. And again, when I came out, I watched the stories on the news. I watched Felicia Rashad, and I watched Camille Cosby, Bill's wife, who I knew for many, many years. And I actually always very much liked her. I didn't have a lot of respect for her because I knew, traveling in the social life of Hollywood, I spent a lot of time up at Hefner's. I was on the list of one of the regular guests, one of the few women on the list to just pop up there whenever I wanted. I could actually friends would come to visit me from my hometown of Detroit, and I would take them up there to walk around and see Hugh Hefner's house and have a drink. And oh my God, you know, this was a big thing. Only a few people that I cherished that were important to me did I do that with, but I was able to do that. So I saw Bill Cosby, and I knew what he was doing, and we used to run into him on the road, and that's actually how the incident happened with me. I had bumped into him in Detroit on the road. We were playing the Pine Knob Theater, Sammy and I, and that's how I got raped by Bill Cosby, because I trusted him like a brother. I had known him for many, many years. I had appeared on his early sitcom in 1970, 71, a episode called The Generation Gap. If anyone wants to see it, it's on YouTube. Bill Cosby early show, 1970 or 71, a very cute scene with Cosby. So I trusted him. He was a good friend, I thought. He knew my sister, Lynette McKee, well. In fact, he's one of the first people to give Lynette a little job. She was several years younger than me, and she was hanging out with me. My parents had let her come and live with me in L.A. I was just starting my career, really, and she wanted a career in show business also, very much so. And Cosby gave her a job working on the set, running errands for him, back and forth to his trailer, and getting his script, and getting his cigars. We thought nothing of it. We totally trusted him. You know, I mean, who would have ever dreamed in a million years that Bill Cosby was doping and raping maliciously women? They were throwing themselves at his feet. he had 4, 5, 6, usually very young white girls with him, backstage, all over everywhere. He spent a lot of time at the mansion, and of course that was a good place to gather your young 19, 20-year-old, gorgeous, but stupid, naive white girl. And that was who he liked, and that was who he did. And really, women were throwing themselves at him. I saw it. I witnessed it. So clearly, the issue with Cosby, and I am going to go into detail and tell you every single thing that happened during my rape incident with Cosby. I'm going to tell it all, everything. We're going to talk about the real details. It's coming up next podcast. But for now, what I want to say is that one thing is for sure. Mr. Cosby has some deep, deep, deep mental issues. What they are, I don't know. But surely, for someone to have this pattern for 50, 60 years, from the late 50s, of molesting, raping, sedating, drugging, brutalizing women, when he didn't have to, because these women, so many of them, were throwing themselves at him. It wasn't necessary to operate that way. So what kind of thrill, what kind of sick, perverted sexual thrill are you getting from this behavior? I don't know. I'm sure the psychiatrists are having a ball with this one. This is an interesting one. Plus to throw away his career. And you know, one of the other things that very few people really talk about, but you have to say, well, what about Camille? And, you know, how did she put up with this? And how did she stay with him? Because she had to know. You know, Bill was a womanizer, so there was always tons and tons and tons of young women. And everybody knew about it. So she turned a blind eye to it, and she looked away. But why? Why would you do that? Why would you, knowing that if you divorced him early on, 40 years ago, she would have done very well in a settlement agreement. She had maybe a child or two, so she would have had everything she needed. Plus, she was a very intelligent woman and well-educated, so she could have worked. She could have gone into production, and she could have done anything. She didn't have to stay with him. So, nobody talks about that. You know, they always talk about a good woman behind a man helps a man, make it, be successful. Well, why don't we talk about what's the deal with Camille Cosby? Why did she stay? Why did she put up with that for so long? What's the matter with her? What kind of mental illness does she have? What kind of low self-esteem? Or is there something else there? What, did Bill act alone? I don't know. He was alone with me. He was very scary also, too. It's another, like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Another personality came out entirely. A very scary personality. So, I think if you're interested in show business tales from the dark side, many of them are just interesting stories about people. I think you'd be interested in my podcast. I'm also going to do a lot of interviews with people that have interesting stories to tell themselves about celebrities and people. And certainly, if we put on my list put Sammy Davis, Richard Pryor, Jamon Wilson, Bill Cosby. That's just the first four. And ironically, they happen to be some of the most famous black men in the industry. And then we went on to, I was with Johnny Carson on and off also for many years, secretly, but people knew, people at the show, his producer knew, Cordova knew, and Ed McMahon knew me very well, knew my sister very well. There were, and Clifton Davis, let's not forget Clifton Davis, another very famous, well-known black man. I like Clifton, he's a good guy. He and I had quite a romance for a long time. I have some very interesting stories to tell you about Clifton. I adore him. This is not hateful rhetoric. This is just the real deal here. This is the story. People talk about this all the time. I was watching Joe Rogan. I like his podcast. I like him. He's an interesting man. He's very smart. I like that. And he gives people a break. He listens to people and he lets them talk. And I appreciate that. But he has talked several times about Bill Cosby. Several comedians have come on and they've had their Bill Cosby minute, and it's such a big deal. They saw him backstage or he said something to them, and I recently saw Eddie Murphy talking to Jerry Seinfeld about the same thing, about Cosby. Cosby was a hateful, evil, he had an evil side. And he showed that side to Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy talked about it. He was trying to tell Eddie Murphy how to do his act, what kind of jokes to do, and putting Eddie Murphy down regarding Eddie's work. And Eddie's probably one of the funniest human beings on the planet. He's a genius. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. I've never met him, but I've had the pleasure of speaking to him on the phone many years ago. I was casting a roast on the Hearns Hagler fight that was going to happen in Las Vegas back in 1985. And we wanted Eddie on the dais. We had all celebrities on the dais. We were going to shoot it in Las Vegas around the fight time, so the people that were coming to Vegas to see the fight would be perfect on this roast. So I had contacted Eddie, and Eddie answered the phone, and he pretended that he was his brother Charlie. It was very funny. I went along with it, but he could have been his brother Charlie, but it sounded awful much like Eddie Murphy, and I got a great kick out of that. So I enjoyed speaking to you, Eddie Murphy, even though you said it was Charlie. So Johnny Carson, and then a relationship that I had over a short period of time with Christopher Walken. And I was exposed to a horrific event that happened. It was the death of John Belushi. That's going to be a whole podcast in itself, because this is quite a story, and no one's really talking about it. They buried it. And I'm sure that Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken don't want to have me talking about this. But you know what? I was there. And I was fucked up, snorting coke for 3 days and drinking with them. And I don't know what they were doing. They were doing something else. But I know it never came out, the story. So I want to talk about it because it's something that happened in my life that shortly after really straightened me up. It scared me. It straightened me up. Shortly after that, I left LA. I left Hollywood for many, many years. I went back home to Michigan because I had seen things. I saw people die, and I got too close to death with other people like John Belushi that night, those days. And it frightened me because I didn't have the fame and the power that they had. And I figured, well, my God, if John Belushi can die, I mean, what am I doing here? What's happening to me? And again, it was the same when I look back now, years after, as I'm now a very mature, aged woman. Again, I was basically really just being used by most of these men. I don't think there was anything for me. I fell in love in a very short time with Christopher Walken over that period of 3 days at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. But, who wouldn't? When I tell you the story, you'll understand how romantic and how sexy it all was. And of course, this was just on the heels. This was November. This was just after the November incident. The death of Natalie Wood was only a few months earlier. This was March, a few months after the death of Natalie Wood, when I met him at a party in the Hollywood Hills, and he invited me to meet him on the MGM lot at his trailer one night, and it turned into 3 days and 3 nights at the Chateau Marmont, which is a whole book and a story all in itself when I explain it and tell it. So for now, we'll go back to Bill Cosby, and he's going to be the story, and he's going to be the details when we come back next time. What we're going to do is we're going to just simply do what happened to me the evening that I was raped and attacked by Bill Cosby. How this happened, what he did to me, all of it, everything in detail. The dark details of it. Okay? So for now, this is Kathy McKee. I hope you will join me again, and I hope that I will get some fans. I'd like to hear from everybody. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you want to hear about these people. There's many more also. I've only given you a short list of the men, the famous men that I have known and dated over the years in show business. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time, okay? Bye-bye for now. Thank you.